Fury paws.
And that's the end of it. There's nothing else. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the season 2 finale of Interview with the Vampire. This episode gave us some much needed resolution with the characters and relationships. One that I was so happy to see finished, and one that I'm so happy to see, start to build back up. Of course, Louis and Lestat, OTP. But we'll go into details. So I'll say this, I have not read any of the novels. I saw Interview with the Vampire 30 years ago, 29 years ago, don't remember it. I also saw Queen of the Damned about 20-ish years ago. Don't remember that either. So just keep that in mind if you want to, leave any comments, discuss the happenings of this episode. That I don't have that frame of reference, so please help me avoid some spoilers. All right, so let's get into it. The first major part of this story is Louis' escape from the coven, from the theater. With the help of the gremlin, he's able to get out, go to a cemetery, hatch a plan, work out all his logistics. He comes back and he so expertly lights that whole place ablaze. And I was watching the behind the scenes stuff about what they did for the fire safety and everything, but I just love that for Louis. I love that he was able to exact his revenge and just light that place up with a little bit of accelerant and his mind. A few escape on motorbike, their motorbikes explode. I loved the scenes of Louis going through the city, compelling Santiago to come to him, all the while taunting him about his original identity as Francis, imitating what he was like when he was begging his maker not to make him. And all these things that just kind of strip Santiago down to the little man that he is. And I'll also say this, Santiago, I knew from, I forgot the episode number, but the episode where he discovers Claudia's diaries. And he was talking to her like, oh, I break the rules all the time. All the while where he was planning such a terrible death for her. And then him mentioning that they use her ashes for their makeup and they put in the popcorn and things like that. Just so disrespectful. Like, these vampires are just so vile. So I'm glad that they are all dead and gone. When we get to this scene where Armand and Louis are back at the apartment after Louis, done killed everybody at the coven. And Louis asking him, how long were you plotting this? Armand tells him it was since the night that Madeline was turned. I don't have an exact timeline, but I would say it's been at least a month, probably more, but let's just say a month, that Armand has been leading Louis on, not letting him know about this whole big plan to kill his sister and really to kill him as well. And then Armand mentioned that he'd been with the coven for, 200 plus years. He sided with them because he wasn't sure that his relationship with Louis was even going to last, or that Louis would stay with him. And when I think about this, I was just thinking about it this morning, actually. Armand was willing to go with what he knew, the coven. And I wish that Louis had felt the same way, or at least acted the same way, because there'd be a good chance that Claudia would still be alive. Again, these are all hypotheticals, what ifs, who knows, like what's happened has happened. But yeah, we see what Armand's loyalty is like. And when Louis asks, like, is Lestat still here? And then his first response is, oh, you can't kill him. It's like, no, like, don't worry about that. I'm just asking, like, can you tell if he's still here? And they go and they see him. At Magnus's lair, we see Lestat, and he's looking very forlorn, very upset. And Louis and Armand show up. Louis asks him some questions about the place and the history there. But we get down to it where Lestat says he's thinking about things. And then Louis is like, are you thinking about how you came all this way to be in a play that would see your daughter get burned to death? And Lestat's not really saying anything. And of course, Louis is very upset about this because he doesn't know the full story at this point. But he says he's going to kill him. And he conjures up some fire as if to say, I'm going to burn you alive. And Lestat says, I have the blood of Magnus, I have the blood of Akasha. And when he mentions that and looks at Armand has no idea like who that is or what that actually means. But I got the impression that Louis knew about Akasha. Louis mentions, your blood is my blood. And on a side note, I was watching an interview with Sam Reed, the actor who plays Lestat, and he said that they'd filmed in season 1, episode 5, where Lestat took Louis up to the sky and then dropped him later. They said when they were up on the sky, there was a scene, or part of the scene, where Lestat mentions that he has Akasha's blood. He has the blood of, this being. I don't really know about Akasha. I have seen Queen of the Damned 1,000 years ago. Didn't really care for it too much. I really only watched it for Aaliyah. But apparently her blood is next level powerful. So I'm guessing she's the one who has the blood that can prevent, her people, her offspring, her fledglings from burning to death. So yeah, I mentioned all that to say that I guess Louis has this power too. I don't know. But I got the impression that this was kept from Armand, or Armand just has no idea about this. Anyway, with that resolved, Louis says, if I can't kill you physically, I will kill you mentally. And then he goes and he kisses Armand in front of him and says that I'm going to be with him. And you just think about that. You're never going to find anyone quite like me. I'm going to be living my life with him. And I think this is one of the most messed up things that this show has shown us. To know that Louis is going to spend his life with a man who he does not trust, who he basically broke up with a few hours before, but he's going to spend his life with him despite the man that he actually loves, just to make him miserable. And he knows how Lestat is, how he can harp on things, how loneliness is one of his least favorite things in the world. And yeah, he's doing this to just hurt him. And if you think from everyone's perspective, that's bad for Louis. I don't care about Armand, but just imagine, this guy is only with you despite his ex. And of course, Lestat there is, left alone too. So this whole thing is really hurting everybody, which this entire time I was wondering, how did Louis get over this? We saw him in 1973. He was still with Armand. Things didn't seem very great with them. Obviously, in 2022, present day, we see them together. How could he have gone over this betrayal? But this was just a way to hurt Lestat in such a grand way. And I think that's very, very revealing about Louis and his psyche. And I wish to death that Lestat had said something or intimated something. I know he said to Armand, let's see how long this holds. And Daniel said that's kind of a weird phrasing. And I was trying to think of what exactly the phrasing meant as well. Because was Lestat saying to Armand, I wonder how long this spell you put on him will hold? I don't know. If you guys have an idea of what Lestat meant by that, ultimately I do understand, he knows that this thing's not gonna last forever. But that exact phrasing, what your interpretation is, please leave it in the comments, because I've been racking my brain trying to think of exactly what that meant. The interview wraps up with Armand and Louis just explaining the logistics of the next couple of days, how they walked around Paris, they took off, went for a bit of a big European trip, ended up in New York and San Francisco, and they ultimately end up here in Dubai. And that's the end of it. There's nothing else. So Daniel stops recording, and the interview is done. And this is the point where Armand pipes in saying, Lestat really, really did love you. And Louis gives him a look like yeah, I know. And I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that there, because I think we all know, and we could all surmise that, yes, Lestat loved him quite a lot. And I think we knew that Armand knew that, and Louis knew that. But it was very telling that he waited for the interview to end for him to say that, as to not immortalize it, as to not really recognize it for the strength that, Lestat's love really has on Louis. Throughout this day, Daniel has been getting messages from Raglan, and he's been asking him for some information, and that turns out to be the script of the play. So Rashid puts the script in a New York Times newspaper. Daniel opens up the script and he sees all the writing in the margins. And we know that Armand has been writing notes in the margins since, Claudia, or probably before Claudia started on the play. So this was clearly written by Armand. And then we see that he's writing things like, oh, Lestat, say this at this point, and, do this for emphasis, emphasize how hoardy and how messy their house was, and all that kind of stuff. So clearly, Armand was much more active in the play. He was in the play. He was directing it. He just wasn't a person sitting on the sidelines watching this display. And then it comes out that there were some inconsistencies. Now, I actually really like that Daniel mentioned this because I was just rewatching episode 2 of season 1, where Louis and Lestat are in the bar. They're talking to that man, the salesman who Louis kills eventually. And yes, Lestat did telepathically say, be careful, Louis, you're scaring him.
Now, what do you grow cotton? Sugar.
Careful, Moshe. You're beginning to frighten the man.
So I look at my daughters.
And I was thinking, hold on, I didn't catch that last season when I watched it for the first time, but watching it a couple of days ago, I'm like, hold on, did the show mess up? But no, the show didn't mess up. Louis did, because he's an unreliable narrator. He forgot, or who even knows? I don't trust Armand. Maybe Armand scrambled his mind at that time. I don't know. But then when he mentions the time when Lestat brought all those soldiers into the house for the little, orgy he was planning, and he told them he compelled them to get out. So we know that Lestat has that capability. And of course, in hindsight, after this whole confrontation and Daniel puts 2 and 2 together, he figured out that Lestat is the one who actually saved Louis and not Armand. And of course, Armand's clipping in, oh, it's in your nature to just, give another jab while you're on your way out because you're a terrible person. And I think Armand has said over the decades to Daniel, it's in your nature to do this. It's always in your nature. He's always getting on Daniel like Daniel's doing the things in the wrong when it's really him. But anyway, then it all comes out. Louis figures out that Lestat is the one who actually saved him, and he storms off. And then Armand looks completely frantic. His eyes go from that weird brown to that weird orange color it turns to when he gets really amped up. And they go off. And then eventually we see that Louis is throwing him into the wall in a very impactful way. And Raglan has been messaging Daniel saying, get out now, get out now. But there's not enough time. We see that this happens. And then at first watch, I thought it was Daniel calling out for Rashid, but it was actually Louis calling out for Rashid, or saying Rashid. And that was, I don't know, I still have feelings about, I feel as though they had to have known that Rashid was involved with the Talamasca some way. I don't know. I have nothing really to support that, but I feel that in their gut, or at least in Louis' gut, he knew that Rashid was part of the Talamasca. And then, so you see Louis tell Armand, be gone, I'm leaving. Don't touch Daniel, and I want you gone. There are a couple of things that I thought. First of all, I thought that was a tall order for Louis to ask, because he knows Armand and Daniel's dynamic. So to think that Armand wouldn't do anything to Daniel, Louis had to have known that he would do something to Daniel. And I also got the impression that Louis has just been waiting for somebody else to come in to shed light on Armand so that he could break up with him and he could maybe not get back together with Lestat right away, but reconcile with Lestat and be with Lestat. Because he seemed very resolute. He seemed like he was very accepting of this big bomb of a story. And he seemed not totally fine, but he seemed pretty fine with it. And I feel, he was just waiting for this moment to break up with Armand. I've been waiting for that moment for him to break up with Armand for a long time, because there was nothing between them. And again, before I knew anything about this whole Armand plotting to have Louis killed situation, there was just nothing between them. There was no passion between them. There was no energy between them. They did not seem happy. They didn't seem unhappy. But there was just nothing between them at all. There was no substance. So I am glad that they broke up. And I am glad that, I'm kind of jumping to the end a little bit, but I'm glad when Louis came back, he decorated the place with colors. He started wearing colors and patterns again. Things weren't as sterile as they'd been the entire time. Because he did mention, I think in maybe the very first episode of season 1, that that place was his coffin. Like, he didn't feel alive in that place. And now he's going to be able to. But we'll talk more about that later. The next thing we see is Louis back in Louisiana. He's in the Uber ride talking to the driver. And I thought it was so cool that he made a reference to New Edition and Ralph Tresvant. I did not expect to hear a Ralph Tresvant reference in Interview with the Vampire, so I definitely appreciate that. And if you don't know, go listen to Sensitivity by Ralph Tresvant. It's really good. Anyway, so we see he checks into a hotel. He comes in and he signs in and he talks a little bit. But I don't know, there's something about the way his credit card was laid down and the way he signed that waiver that made me think that somehow that waiver, the signature in particular, is going to come in to the story somehow next year. I have no idea, obviously, but I thought that was interesting that they pointed that out. We see Louis goes on a little tour and they go to his old house. And of course, so much broken telephone. They totally mispronounced Lestat's name. They called him Sebastian, which I think is kind of funny because, on a side note, I know Sam Reed, before, he had like a stage name and his stage name was Sebastian. So Lestat's incorrect name was also Sebastian. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. But yes, then he sees that there's this vampire guy picking up rats and he follows where he goes. And it turns out he is Lestat's rat catcher. Now we see Lestat. Oh gosh, I wonder how long Lestat had been in that state, because he was not in a good state at all. In this decrepit house, dilapidated house. So different from the opulent man that we saw all last year, that we saw on the stage in Paris in the 40s. Like, this guy, still looks good because Lestat always looks good, but in complete squalor and playing a keyboard, a wooden keyboard, against Siri. And yeah, that clip of him saying Siri stop, that took me out. That made me laugh so much because it's just so funny seeing him in such a modern, with such modern accessories. And then, yeah, he and Louis talk and it's very like, oh, like, hello. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm just rehearsing right now. And then Louis gets into it and he asks him about, were you the one who saved me? And he says, well, I don't like to talk about all my virtues and things like that. Like, I know Louis wishes, and Lestat wishes he said something sooner. But I'm guessing maybe he didn't say anything sooner because he just felt so guilty about everything from their time in Louisiana to the fact that, like, they fought so much and Lestat did so much to get his family plotting to kill him. I feel maybe as though he felt as though he didn't deserve Louis at that point. And so he said, eventually I knew he'd figured it out, and look, you're here, 77 years later, or 70 years later, or a very long time later. And then they talk, and Lestat mentions the phone call he had with Armand in 73. And this man knew the exact date, the exact time. And he asked, did he hurt himself? And it was just so, like, I love Louis and Lestat so much. The idea that, 50 years later, he is still just as emotionally wrought as he was back then, thinking that Louis hurt himself in some way and, attempted to kill himself, got this man with this big, deep voice crumbling and cracking because he loves him so much. And I love that. I love them together so much. Like, even though, yes, their relationship's really messed up, they're just totally meant for each other. And yeah, this is a deep, deep love that they have that Armand and Louis just could never. Armand could never love Louis the way Lestat loves him. And then he mentioned, yeah, he was upset, and we know he was upset by Claudia. And then Lestat mentions too how like he can't get that day out of his mind, can't get her out of his mind, and how with her last look, when she looked at him, he saw a little girl looking out to her father, and then he cuts himself off saying like, but I was never, and I think he might have said, who knows, but I think he might have said like, I was never the father you were, or I never loved her enough, or I never showed her enough love, or whatever it was. But then Louis just stops him, goes in for a very deep, deep hug, and they both look so relieved and comforted in each other. And it made my heart so warm. And then we see they're talking to each other. We can't hear what they're saying to each other. And Louis gives him like a kiss on the cheek, and they go in for another hug. And so they're not together. I wouldn't say they're together now, but this means to me that they have forgiven each other. They still love and respect each other. Who knows what will happen later, but maybe they did need these 70 plus years apart to really heal themselves. Hey guys, so when I was editing this video, I noticed that the music playing during this hug scene is the same music that played in episode 1 of season 1 when they first hooked up in that magical night they experienced. So this tells me these two are getting back together. Mark my words. Okay, back to the video. And Louis, again, he mentions, like, for the longest time, I thought you turning me was a curse, but now I realize that it's a gift. And I'm, recognizing all the opportunity that comes with being a vampire, and thank you. Because, yeah, when you think, I don't think vampirism is for everybody. I wouldn't want to be a vampire, but for somebody like Louis who, back when he was, a regular person, he was going through a lot of different struggles, like societally, racially, with his family, with his sexuality and all that stuff. And yes, it's been 100 plus years later, so he's been able to grow and things have changed, but he's really able to be his own person now. And we'll see more about that a bit later on. But yes, so this is a gift that Lestat gave him. And something that he wanted. He didn't know all the ins and outs, everything, but I think latently back then, like, he actually did want it. And I also thought it was, it's a little bit of a switcheroo, right? Because now Lestat is the guy who just stays at home, and he has somebody bring him rats, which, Lestat has always been that ferocious killer who loves the hunt. And being without Claudia, being without Louis, reduced him to this man who's just pretty much, enduring. Even though he says he's living, he's enduring. By Lestat's standards, he's just enduring. So I'm really excited to see what happens next year. I'm pretty sure, I've heard people talk about in the books, like, they do get back together. They're going to get back together. Those two together are just like dynamite on television. So I'm really excited to see what next year brings. Daniel, we next see on a morning show in Atlanta with a host questioning his interview with vampires, not believing that this was for real, but of course Daniel says yes, it was. Daniel is very casual throughout this. He's swearing throughout the interview. He's wearing an AC/DC t-shirt underneath his sweater. So this is not the more composed Daniel that we're used to seeing, especially if he's going to be on television. He doesn't care. Why doesn't he care? He's a vampire now. Obviously, Armand was going to bite him. So I know a lot of people are saying, oh, I wonder if Daniel will become a vampire, weeks ago. And I thought, no, he's just there to interview, whatever. But once Louis left the house with Armand there, I'm like, okay, Armand's going to get in, and he did. And I think that Louis knew this was going to happen. And I also think, more importantly, that Daniel knew this was going to happen. Of course, Armand was going to do it. He was in a fit of rage. This man has been annoying him for this entire time, going into the details of his life that he didn't want anyone to know about, and then just busted up his marriage of 70-something years. So, yeah, he's going to be upset. Daniel stuck around. I feel Daniel could have left with Louis at the same time, but no, he stuck around, and he is now a vampire. And knowing Daniel's life, how that his career, he hasn't been satisfied with his career for a long time. His daughters hate him. He's got 2 ex-wives, so he doesn't have anything to live for. And he's got Parkinson's as well. So I guess we'll see next year. I have no idea. If you guys know, does vampirism cure you of diseases? I have no idea. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, no, he's a vampire. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen next year. Obviously, we see at the end that, Armand has flown off. They don't know where he is, and he hasn't heard from him. And of course, Daniel doesn't like Armand anyway. And so, so now he's just kind of there, poking at Louis and asking, have you read the book? Have you read the book? Have you read the book? And then we go to Louis. He's back at the house, or the condo in Dubai. We see he's swapped out a lot of the furniture. There's color, there's flowers. The triptych that is gone has been replaced with a very bright painting. And we see a picture of his brother. So we got that from his house. And he has Claudia's dress displayed. And we see he's in that rock pit, or whatever you want to call it. And he's conjuring all these vampires who are mad at him because they know that he's the one that's behind this memoir that's out. And so they don't like that their stories are revealed. And he's basically saying to all of them, come at me, bro. And I'm wondering, I know this is set up for next year. And Louis, for this whole time, or for a lot of time, he thought that Lestat was a crazy one. Louis is also a little crazy too. Louis needs drama. Louis needs chaos to survive. So them letting all these vamps know I live at this street, on this floor, I don't have my locks locked up. The concierges, they're good, but they are human, so you could kill them. Come at me, bro. I have no idea why. Well, I guess he wants to take his power back. I suppose, again, he thanked Lestat for turning him into a vampire to begin with. And so now he's fully embracing that life. And I guess, in a way, he's felt in prison by life because he dedicated his life to Armand for so long, even though he knew he was miserable the entire time. So I guess this is a way to kind of break free and get that power back. That's one approach. I personally wouldn't want to have a bunch of humanoid freaks with special powers coming at me, but, I'm not Louis, so I can't really say. So there's one point that kind of, sticks out to me where I'm like, it bears out the point that our beloved Claudia has made this entire time. It's always about Louis and Lestat. Lestat came there, and I know that if he could, he would have chosen to save both of them. But he only had the amount of resources, the power, the ability to save Louis by, conjuring the people to say banishment and not sentence him to death. It could be argued that Claudia broke more rules, and she was in the coven where Louis wasn't in the coven. And so they would have gotten to her anyway. And I don't believe that Santiago, even if the crowd said, oh, let Claudia off, I don't think Santiago was how depraved and how vicious he was that he would even, listen to that anyway. Not that it was a real trial, for one. But yeah, Louis was a little bit different. He was a bit of an aside. And anyway, so Lestat used his powers to save him. And I'm not blaming Lestat, but it does, again, give weight to the idea that Louis will always be Lestat's person, and that she's always a second. It's never about her. It's about the two of them. All I wanted from this season finale was for Louis and Lestat to forgive each other. And that's what happened. And I cannot put into words how happy I am to see the two of them, back in love with each other. Again, they're not like romantically together yet, but like that bond is never going to go away. We know it's just a matter of time. And I'm glad that they were able to forgive each other and to express their feelings and show just how deeply they do care about each other. This episode really contrasted the relationship between Louis and Armand versus the relationship with Louis and Lestat. So say, for example, at the end, after Louis tosses Armand and the bookshelf breaks and all the books fall down. When you think about it, Those bookshelves were all the way up there. I'm sure they've got a ladder, but obviously that is a lot of effort. Most bookshelves that we have are, floor level. And so all these things Armand had out of Louis's reach as a way to control him, again, in their weird dom-sub relationship. I'm so glad that's over with. But when you think about back in the day, last season, Louis used to read all of Lestat's books. Lestat had thousands of books, and Louis used to read them all the time because they really shared with each other. As messed up as the relationship was at many points, they had that openness and they shared with each other. And when you think about Louis' suicide attempt and how Armand, yes, he did save him, but he let him suffer for many days. He let Daniel suffer as well in the other room. But then when he talked to him, when he finally got to him, he said, "Oh, am I going to be on suicide watch this entire time?" And it seemed really callous. And with Lestat, 50 years after Louis killed himself, he's still crying like it's that same day. And again, he knows the time to the minute. With Louis and Armand done, Louis has the capability to, be by himself for a bit and be comfortable in that. But then later on, take the opportunity to find somebody, should be Lestat, to actually have like a proper relationship and companionship with, not this sham, this 70-something-year-old sham. I'm so glad Armand is gone. I'm curious to know where he's going to be. I'm pretty sure he's going to be in the next season, so we'll see him again. And again, this is no slight on the actor, Assad. He's great, but Armand is terrible, so I'm really glad to see him go. I love this episode. As I mentioned, I love the cinematography. I love all the different locations. It was nice to see Louisiana again, and I hope Louisiana plays a part in next season too, because I always feel so when I watch certain shows, the city where it's located is like another character, right? Like when I watch Sex and the City, like Manhattan is the character. Or when I watch The Bear, Chicago was a character. And when I watch this show, I always think of Louisiana. So it was very nice to be back in that setting. And that's all I can really think about for now. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a recap of the entire season. And so I'll be back to, have everything in perspective and chat with you guys. But I would love for you all to leave some comments, to start discussion. We can talk about this. We can talk about what we're excited for next year. And I'll see you later here on I See Melanie. Thank you so much for this interview with the Vampire Ride, and I'll be back for more. Okay? Bye.